You are listening to the Music Business Blitz.
Hey, what's up everyone, and welcome to the second season of the Music Business Blitz. Now, throughout this season, I'll be switching it up just a little bit by not only touching on important industry news, but also featuring interviews with key industry players to help us better understand and navigate our rapidly changing industry. So to get things kicked off, I wanted to first explore the world of playlist pitching, or as my guest today better defines it, streaming strategies. Now, most of us are probably already familiar with this digital service, but I wanted to dig just a little bit deeper and hear perspectives from industry professionals who operate in this space to help me answer questions like, when should streaming strategies be a part of your marketing efforts? What types of results should an artist team expect to get during a campaign? And what questions should you ask a streaming strategies or a pitching company before you hire them? And my first guest on the show, Fallon, he's going to help us explore these questions in depth. Now, Sean is a very articulate and intelligent fellow who graduated magna cum laude from Belmont University with a bachelor's in music business, and then he decided to take the entrepreneur route with his company Indian Moon, where he not only manages artists, but also provides one-off management and label services. And what service does he currently offer that has increased significantly in popularity? You got it, streaming strategies. So let's go ahead and jump right into it with Mr. Sean Fallon. First off, I just want to thank you for taking the time to chat with me today, Sean.
Yeah, absolutely.
I always love meeting other creative and business-minded people who are doing awesome things like you're doing. And I would hate to call you an artist manager because I know that you do a lot more than that. So can you kind of fill us in on what you're up to right now and how you got to where you're at?
Yeah, so artist management is the bulk of what I do now. I'd say it's about 90% is working with my management clients, which are at the moment David Dunn and Griffin Peterson. In the past, I've worked with lots of other people on the management side. A guy named Chuck Shyrock, he goes by C. Shyrock now. He's still a marketing client of mine. Have a cover project here in Nashville called Ryman, and then a few other artists. I've been doing that for about 6 years now, pretty much out the gate out of Belmont University here in Nashville. And then, kind of since starting management right out of college, I've also been doing tons of marketing projects that really kind of entails everything. Very much campaign based. So working with people in the short term, 2 to 3 months, that includes, coming up with a marketing strategy, ad management, idea generation, and then more recently, Spotify promotion, which I don't really call it Spotify promotion. I really like to package it as streaming strategy because, we touch with all the DSPs, so Apple, Pandora, Amazon, making sure that we just have a sort of all-encompassing strategy that touches every DSP in a meaningful way. So been doing that for the streaming strategy for about 2 years now. And it is a ever evolving beast, and it's very interesting in this day and age. So I guess that's the brief synopsis. Also do talent buying for a fair. I've been doing that for about 2 years. Kind of all over the place.
Got your fingers in a little bit of everything, man. Very cool. Very cool. And actually, honestly representative of how we all tend to have to operate in this day and age. So tell me a little bit about how you found your way into artist management.
So I've been doing, like I said, it's been about 6 years. I started Indian Moon about 2.5 years ago. That is the management company that I operate under. It wasn't so much a decision as it was kind of, I want to be alongside the artist, and I wanted to be in whatever role helped an artist get from A to Z. And I naturally felt, people kind of told me when I started exploring what music business was, that's pretty much what the artist manager does. So I was like, okay, that's cool. That's what I want to do. When I was in high school, I'd look at bands like Coldplay and Green Day and all these, major acts that I looked up to, and I was like, I want to know what gets them to where they are now. I just kind of, I dug into it, and artist management is where I sort of wound up.
And so is that kind of the long-term goal, artist management, or what type of role do you eventually want to settle into?
Yeah, I think artist management has always been my focus, and it's always sort of what I'm aiming for. Obviously, that's what I'm doing now. Where things take me in 10, 20 years, I'm not entirely sure. Open to all ideas, all ventures. Like I said, I've done some talent buying, so festival promotion is obviously something I'm super interested in as well. Developing marketing strategies, branding, all that kind of stuff. It really, all these different aspects of the industry sort of in one way or another can fall under the artist management umbrella. You're kind of playing multiple hats at the end of the day when you're working with artists, especially on the independent side, on the smaller side. So open to wherever it takes me. But for right now, it's definitely artist management focused.
Dude, 100%. I am on board with you because my experience as an artist manager is exactly the same. Like, you touch a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
So this multifaceted experience, is that what led you to offer one-off services with Indian Moon, like digital marketing strategies and plans, streaming and sales strategies, and ad management?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that was kind of a supplement to Indian Moon. I think, at the end of the day, being an independent artist manager with smaller acts, it's a tough go of it, right out the gate, especially when you're starting your own company. So I wanted to have a way where I could take on other projects where I wasn't, totally investing in a baby artist career, but still offering services that they found of value. When, Spotify took off and this whole playlist promotion stratosphere became a thing, that was definitely something I was, interested in from the get-go. So that was one of those one-off services that I knew I could bring value to an independent artist career. But beyond that, just, developing marketing strategies and offering ways for artists to really give them the tools they needed to succeed without, holding their hand through the entire process, just kind of drafting things up and giving them the means to do it themselves, I think was just something I knew I could do and wanted to offer when I couldn't, step in and be their artist manager from the get-go.
So out of all the services that you offer, is there one service that is super popular above all the rest, or are there two that are more popular, or are they all pretty even keel?
Oh yeah. I mean, definitely streaming strategy. It's changed. When I first started that, I think at the top of 2016, I was working with all types of clients, all types of genres, mostly marketing strategies, kind of developing what they wanted for their career and doing like a 6-month, 12-month, 2-year forecast of how to get there. And I was hiring other streaming promotion companies in that time and kind of was like, understanding how they maneuvered, how that whole business operated. And so since then, I think, as you've seen, the industry has become insanely focused on playlists, and that's where everybody's mind goes to these days. So as soon as they hear that that's something that I've worked in or know something about, that's immediately where their mind goes to. And it's for good reason. I think playlists and streaming, that it's a tangible value. You can see monthly listeners, you can see saves on a song, you can see those, just the stats rising. So naturally, everybody gravitates to that. So these days, if I'm doing one-off services, more often than not, it's going to be somebody approaching me wanting help on the streaming side.
Makes sense, man. So when you first heard about Spotify, did it blow your mind, or were you an early adopter expecting this type of big shift in the industry with tech becoming so prominent?
In terms of promotion?
No, really just in it being available to consumers, because we all knew about Napster and file sharing. Mm-hmm. But when I first heard about being able to legally stream thousands and thousands of songs on demand, as a consumer, I thought, man, this is way too good to be true. Now, I did receive some foresight into music becoming, in a sense, a utility, meaning a subscription-type billing service, but wasn't quite sure how it was going to translate. So when streaming started to gain momentum, it honestly took me about 6 months to really believe it.
Yeah, it's...
because at the time, it seemed like such a crazy idea.
It is, yeah. And I guess I was on the ground floor in the US. Spotify has been around since, I think, 2009, something like that. When they came to the US in 2012, I had a subscription pretty much the first month it came here. So I've been a huge fan of it, huge fan of streaming since the forefront. But I think when I was at Belmont, something our professors kind of just relayed to us was streaming is the future. Like, get used to it. Nobody's buying albums. And this was 2012. So nobody really understood the value of it yet. It was just kind of inevitably where things were heading. So nobody understood, okay, is there really a return on this? Like, are people going to be making money, or is this just inevitably, the ecosystem that we're going to have to operate under because, no one's going to buy records. So we're just kind of left with it. I was a fan of it from the start. I think access is the most important thing in music, because people are going to find a way to listen to it, and whether it's pirating or legally, one way or the other. So I think offering a means of legally listening to music and beyond that, giving a means for people to discover music, I think has been huge. I've discovered way more artists and styles and genres that I never knew I liked in the streaming era than I had before it all.
Right. And that's one of the arguments, and you probably know this as a talent buyer, that has shown up multiple times and really is a testament to the power of a playlist, right? Now more so than ever, a lot of people want to go to festivals to experience various artists because that's what they're more commonly exposed to on a streaming service like Apple Music or Spotify or Pandora. So I thought it was really interesting how playlists have worked to the advantage of the live space.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so in a roundabout way, that actually brings us to the main reason why I wanted to chat with you today, Sean, aside from you being an awesome dude, is that we are both part of a group on Facebook called Artist Managers Connect, and you posted a very lengthy but very well thought out response to an article that was put up by Fortune magazine titled The Murky Business of Spotify Playlist Pitching. So before we do a deep dive into a few of the points that you made in your response, let's first do a high-level recap of the article for those who are not familiar with it. So I'm assuming everybody out there knows what playlisting is. And so for the tiny amount of you who do not know what it is essentially you going out to somebody, hiring a third-party service provider and saying, hey, I got some new music, I got a new single, I got a new album. Can you push this out to your ecosystem of playlisters? And if they enjoy the music, keep my fingers crossed, maybe they will add it to their playlist so I can get a little bit of traction on my song. And so there are two companies that are mentioned in the article. One is Playlist Push, the other is Falling Apple. And the author of the article actually used his new music to document his experience with these two different playlisting companies. So overall, the article provided different viewpoints on the playlist ecosystem. And with all that being said, I think that you, Sean, beautifully summarized up the article with the quote, do the research and know how the platform works before you hire someone to take on your project. They should ultimately just be a supplement to your overall strategy. So let's go ahead and get into it right now, because my very first question is, why would an artist blindly throw money at something that they didn't fully understand?
Well, a lot of people are doing it these days. Yeah, I think that what I was getting at with that quote, and I can't take credit for this, I've heard it from a whole bunch of people, is that your playlist strategy is not your marketing strategy. And your playlist strategy, specifically with Spotify, is just one part of it. So when you're talking about trying to break a new artist and trying to really get your name out there, obviously streaming is going to be a huge part, if not the biggest part of that, but it shouldn't be your only focus. Obviously your brand, your content strategy, your release plan, all that plays into it as well. So yeah, streaming is just kind of, to me, a supplement to the big picture. And obviously with Spotify having this sort of, I don't know what you want to call it, this backdoor means of promotion, it's a way for independent artists to be proactive. So it's really no surprise that it's taken off in the way it has. It's just kind of as the article put it, the wild, wild west right now.
Right. And just like you said, this is only part of your strategy. I mean, have you recently worked with any clients where playlisting wasn't a part of their current strategy?
Not as of recently. I think the industry is definitely caught up to the notion that, playlist is the battleground you want to have a stake in. So in the past few years, I really haven't had any marketing conversations that haven't at least had streaming as, the number one or number two priority with where we're at. Whatever DSP you're prioritizing, whether it's Apple, Amazon, Pandora, Google Play, any of those, I think that is very artist dependent, because market shares are different depending on genre. So you might have a larger focus with a client on Pandora if they're, a Christian client versus, something on Google or even Spotify. So it just varies, but yeah, I think it's a huge focus these days for everybody, independents and majors alike.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't Spotify need to renegotiate their contract terms with the big three majors next year?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't really know what their schedule for all that is. To me, it gets convoluted, and I stopped keeping up with who owns what. I know Sony sold off their share recently, but yeah, it's that whole side of it, where the licensing is definitely outside of my area of expertise.
What's really interesting to me at this point in time, with streaming being relatively new still, is that artists, in a sense, are needing to hedge their bets on what streaming services to put money and time into. Yeah,
and I think it's all of them. I think at this stage in the game, Spotify has 36% of the market share based on the numbers that I just saw recently, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. I think they've either grown or retained that for the past year and a half. So I don't think that's going to change. I don't think Spotify's going anywhere. But specifically when it comes to streaming strategy, I think a lot of people see Spotify as the end all be all, especially on the independent side. And the reason for that is just there's vanity numbers attached to it. So if you can look at your account on Spotify and you went from 100 monthly listeners and now you got 30,000. Well, that feels good and that looks good. And that's a story that you can bring to other people. But there's 5 other majors out there, way more than that, depending on what markets you're in and what you have access to. But Apple's definitely not something to avoid with their massive market share. Amazon as well. Both those companies are making huge plays. YouTube Music just came out. I mean, they're making huge plays into the market. So to me, it's a huge mistake to avoid the other DSPs. And a lot of them don't have, when it comes to streaming promotions, don't have this roundabout way where you can access curators and pitch your music to them. But that doesn't mean that you can't incorporate best practices and kind of be on the forefront of the opportunities that are there. Pandora is a great example of that. I have to kind of walk independent artists all the time through what Pandora AMP is and how to run a featured track campaign and what that, can do for your listener base on that platform, when most of the time people think Pandora is dying, which, I don't share that opinion. I think that they're going to remain a major player and definitely have a space in this ecosystem. So it's definitely, in my opinion, not something to avoid ever.
I honestly agree. And I think that really the name of the game is, adjusting your expectations accordingly, right? So if I'm rating for a release and I go to Indian Moon and a PR company or a radio promotions company with my budget and my goals for the record, then I need to be ready to adjust my goals and expectations based upon the feedback that you guys give me, right? One of the best pieces of advice that I received when I was looking for PR companies to work with on various new releases was that if this company tells you they can definitely get you into X, Y, and Z blogs and publications, then dude, run the other way, because the chances of that happening aren't necessarily, slim to none, but a lot of success comes with releasing the right record at the right time. So, with that being said, I'm curious, and I probably know the answer to this already, but do you get a lot of clients, with the expectation from day one for you to say, I'm going to get you on X number of playlists and get you X number of streams throughout a particular campaign?
Yeah. Sure. I mean, whenever I onboard a new client, I send out an email that basically, I think my terminology is, don't qualify your ROI by, your monthly streams, or specifically more your revenue. I think that is a very tough thing to qualify in this day and age, because how do you quantify in monetary terms what 20,000, 30,000 monthly listeners is to you? Because that could mean potentially, 100, 200 people go to a show. It could mean opening up a market that you've never been to before. It could mean expanded growth down the road from the algorithms picking up your music now that you have a fan base to start with. So yeah, I try and explain, I guess, my interpretation specifically on Spotify of how the ecosystem there is working on the front end so that they can manage their expectations. Because I've handled clients that, their starting point is 2 million listeners. Like that's where they're at monthly. And so I'm a supplement to a much larger picture for them. They might be a major label client, or they might, just have a really great following. So if I'm coming in, it's not a drop in the bucket. I think that you're obviously moving the needle some, but they're not going to be, getting onto you about, where are my 5, 10 playlists. But on the complete opposite side of that, when you have independent artists who, I've managed campaigns where we started a song with less than 10 streams on it, where, that might have been out for 4 or 5 months. So you take an artist with 30 monthly listeners to 30,000. That's huge. That's like incredible for them. Is that going to, pay their bills as an artist for the next year? Definitely not. But it's a step in the right direction. And we can, I guess, dive into why I think that that's huge from the algorithm standpoint, and why I think that that's very foundational building. But the expectations are really hard to deliver, hard to quantify. And what you were saying about PR is absolutely true. If any playlist company is coming in saying they can guarantee results, they're lying because they either, there's so many rabbit holes I could go down with this. They're either buying out lists, which is terrible for another reason, or they're, working with terrible lists and they're not going to drive any engagement. And if this is also going down a rabbit hole, but if you're on the wrong type of lists where people aren't going to be engaging with your song, where they might listen to it once and skip, where they're not going to be saving it, well, that's going to, in my opinion, play against you when it comes down to the algorithm. So yeah, you might have a huge spike from people just listening to your song once and being on bigger lists, but your entire strategy is dependent upon those playlists. So what happens when you fall off of them? Your listenership goes right back down to where it was, and great, you might walk away with 10, 15,000 more streams on a song, but that's not really going to do anything for you in the long run.
I love the fact that you are bringing up the term long run, and I could not agree with you more. Like 100%, I am with you. And you made another good point in your article, right, where you say, quote, you want engagement, fans of the artist and not the playlist. And to me, this parallels social media, right, because you may have an artist with 10,000 likes or follows, which looks impressive on the surface, but when they post something and 1% of their following engages, then to me, it's like, what's the point of having that many fans if no one's really giving a shit about you? So in the streaming world, if you get on a playlist that doesn't hit your current or potential demographic and the listeners of that, check out your song and then they skip it within the first 5 seconds, and you're right, there's absolutely no long-term value created for the artist. Sure.
Yeah. And one thing I said in response to that article was I think that the algorithms are a lot smarter than people give it credit for. And this is purely speculation. I can't speak down to the specifics because I haven't had those conversations with Spotify's developers. But if I'm looking at a song and I'm a developer and I see that this song is maybe being listened to by 100,000 people, but 99% of them are skipping it. If I was, writing the code for that, I would say that song is not a very engaging song, despite the network of playlists that it's on. So I wouldn't prioritize that in terms of algorithm. I wouldn't prioritize that in terms of getting that out to Discover Weekly, Release Radar. And the data on that is going to take time to build. So if most of the people are skipping it, then you're not getting a lot of data on that song. You're not getting a good sample size of what the general fan who likes that song is. So Spotify, I don't think, would be able to recommend it to the appropriate audience. So my goal with the campaign, whenever I'm taking it on, independents or majors alike, is to be very thoughtful with where we're pitching and not operating in volume, trying to cast a wide net, trying to hit 100 playlists and you're on this many playlists with this many followers. It's really finding, even if it's a playlist that's small, 1,000 followers up to 5,000, it's finding the right playlist where the curator is going to love that song. It's going to stay on that playlist for a long time, which is going to lead into your daily mixes, your release radars coming up, your Discover Weeklies. And that's the kind of stuff that drives, in my opinion, way more engagement in the long run. If you're sticking on Discover Weekly for a year, 2 years, and just cycling through that, and people who are, they're getting recommended your song through that playlist, and they're saving it so that the next person can get recommended that song. That creates a cycle of engagement that is, it's impossible to qualify the value out of that, I think.
Sure, 100%. And to me, those are the most important ones and tailored heavily towards the listener, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They're any sort of algorithmic playlist on Spotify. It's your Discover Weeklies, your Release Radars, and your daily mixes, and then there's a few others. Radio, I guess, is one of those, but that operates a little bit differently. All those are tailored to the listener. So my goal is to try and make sure that we're tripping the algorithms, and to do that, you need to be on the right playlists and make sure that those playlists are where people are going to engage with you. If you've got an acoustic song, like an acoustic American song, and it's on some, foreign list where every other song is a title in a different language, and you're just smacked in the middle of it because that list is owned by a network or something, and you wound up on it in a weird way. Great. Like, that's a massive list. You'll probably pick up listeners, but I don't think that many people are going to be engaging with that song. And engaging means saving that song, adding it to their own playlist, finding and then giving that song a way for it to find its home with any number of users through the algorithm.
Those are actually the ones I listen to first.
Yeah, same.
So could not agree with you more on that. Now, another interesting point that you made was in saying that anytime you pay for a placement, you are corrupting the final product. Can you do a little bit of a deep dive on that statement for us?
Yeah, so I work with a ton of other people who worked in the playlist promotion world, and I think that we've seen time and time again is that anytime random songs are added to a playlist and they don't fit with the final end product, whatever that playlist is, whatever that genre it's trying to support or theme it's trying to support, whenever you put random songs on there that are either not of great quality or just not in line with that, you're corrupting that playlist. And so that's why I think, there's a number of reasons for it, but I think that's why you can see playlists with 400,000 followers, 500,000 followers, where you can hardly pick up 100 monthly listeners from it. Because again, it goes back to, I think, how Spotify treats that algorithm. I don't think those playlists are really meant to be prioritized in search. If if they're looking at a playlist where people are staying on it for 1 or 2 songs and then they're like, oh, this is not what I thought it was, they're moving off of it. Why would Spotify, if you're typing in X, Y, and Z into the search, why would they want to recommend that playlist to you? Aside from the fact that they want to, prioritize their own editorial playlists. So I don't deal with any of those playlists. A lot of them asking pay for placement. First of all, I don't deal with payola at all because, again, there's a whole number of reasons, but yeah, the end product being corrupted is my main philosophy. Beyond that, it's a violation of Spotify's terms of service. So I don't want my artists to be on those playlists. I don't want to jeopardize their stake on Spotify. And I also don't think it's going to be really valuable to them. Again, not trying to operate in volume. I just don't think that those are the types of playlists that are going to drive engagement. Again, it looks great from a vanity perspective. You're on X, Y, and Z playlist, and those playlists have this many followers between them. But at the end of the day, I don't really care about that. Like, obviously I want to get for my clients, the most number of playlists with the most number of followers, but not just for the sake of having the most number of playlists and the most number of followers. I want them to be the right playlists where people are going to find my artist and be a fan of that artist. And then ultimately shifting, if you look at the stats on the back end for Spotify for Artists, ultimately shifting away from, they're listening on other people's playlists or on Spotify's editorial playlists and constantly moving that needle over to their own saved libraries and on my artist catalog, so that in the long run, people are becoming more and more fans of the artist themselves versus just that playlist they found them on.
Agreed. And I think that I'm picking up the undertones here in being that even though DSPs are additional platforms that are available to all musicians and essentially leveling up the playing field per se, in a way, also increasing artists' reach, significantly once they upload to this particular platform, it doesn't mean that this one tool will help you level up your career overnight. Some musicians may think this, and I see similarities between playlisting, getting on a very popular playlist and the viral video. When it was fresh, people thought, hey, I just get one of these, boom. Then we are off to the races and I've made it. Just as we've been discussing, a playlist is just another useful tool in your kit that you are going to need to continuously build and continuously work towards getting a more and more playlists, getting placements higher on very significant playlists. So don't just think that if you get on Rap Caviar or New Music Friday that you can just throw in the towel and be like, hey man, I'm done with the marketing and promotion because we've made it.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I would absolutely, and I pitch to the editorial team all the time. That's a huge priority for me. And I think that getting on those playlists can absolutely move the needle, and it's going to be massive for an artist's career. Speaking about the high level, the editorial playlists. When I'm saying, I'm trying to hit the most number of playlists that are valuable to the artist, I'm more speaking on the independent side. I don't think that any playlist is going to break an artist's career other than, maybe a Rap Caviar or Today's Top Hits or, something with that caliber will. But when I'm dealing with my clients, we're not really at a level where we're going to be hitting those from the get-go. So what I'm talking about is more building a long-term streaming strategy that is going to constantly build, working away from 5,000 monthly listeners 1 year. And then the next year you have 30,000. And then the next year you have consistently 60,000. And it's absolutely, any way you slice it, in my opinion, it's a long tail game. I don't really put time limits on my campaigns whenever I take on an artist. I kind of tell them that if there's a playlist 6 months down the road that I think your artist or your song is good for, I'm going to pitch it for you guys, because that playlist might not have been on our radar 6 months ago. It might be something that's new and just popped off, and it might be something that's constantly building. So I want to make sure that for me, if I can create a meaningful relationship with that curator by sharing a song that I think is great for it, great. And then the artist has a new playlist in their belt 6 months down the road. And that is, again, going to constantly churn out that algorithm. And that's going to come into play. I think it's really hard to quantify, because when I start a campaign, we might hit a good number of playlists, but we might not trip the algorithm to 6-8 months in. I've had I've had 3 campaigns this year alone that have, I think the algorithm came into play 5 months after we started working on a song. And we hit all the playlists that we wanted to. It just took time to get, 500 saves or 1,000 saves or wherever it needs to be for Spotify to be like, okay, we have enough information on this song. We're going to try it out in Discover Weekly this week if it resonates. And again, this isn't actually Spotify. It's all their computer algorithm, making these judgments. But it takes a lot of time to build the data on the song unless you have a massive hit that's on an editorial playlist from the get-go.
Well, Sean, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me, and it makes me feel really good, and I'm assuming it makes a lot of other people listening to this feel really good when a service provider like yourself comes off as a gentleman and truly in it to get the best final product for your clients and not just to make a quick buck and then move on to the next project. Now, the takeaway quote that I kind of want to wrap this interview up with is what you put down. If you do hire somebody, make sure you know what list they're targeting for you and the methodology behind that. No, there are still no guarantees in this world, but you can mitigate that risk by hiring folks who you trust are taking into account the big picture. And from my experience talking with multiple third-party service providers on, various releases, there is something to be said regarding initially taking your project to a potential company and leaving that initial conversation with the consideration nuggets that you have explained today. You can't make any guarantees. This might happen 5 months down the road, so it might not be immediate. But here's the plan, and here's how we're going to surgically execute it to success. Now, it may not get you to the level that you want overnight. I mean, it might, but here's a path that's calculated over the long haul, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, playlist promotion streaming strategy isn't the bulk of what I do. I turn away way more clients that come my way, and that's for the sole reason that if I'm taking on a project, I want to know that I can deliver value. I want to know that I have the right catalog of lists, and I want to be able to sleep easy at night because if I'm spinning my wheels on a project and it's not going anywhere for the artist, but they have paid me on the front end for it, and I can't deliver value for them in the long run, then I don't feel good about that. I've worked with, like you said, PR companies and a whole bunch of other marketing agencies in my time as an independent manager, and yeah, it's never fun when you throw money away in the front end, you have no results. So I don't operate in volume when I take on campaigns. I take on a very, very small amount compared to I think what a lot of companies do in this world. But what I tell anybody, I'm happy to have a conversation with anybody on the front end of a campaign, whether or not I'm able to take on their project or not. And I always tell them that there's nothing proprietary here. Streaming strategy, as much as the companies will try and, if they're trying to sell you on a campaign, as much as they might try and say that we have X catalog of lists and we have all these vested relationships and we can get your music in front of the right people. Well, that might be true, and they might have been doing it for a while. In my opinion, the lists that are moving the needle are constantly changing. What might be an engaging list one month might have started, taking compensation for their list, and now they've got a bunch of random songs and nobody's really listening to it. Meanwhile, you have a list with 500 followers that is just starting to take off. So if I'm recommending anything to an independent artist, it is to listen to podcasts like this, do research, figure out how to contact these curators, which isn't hard. You're basically just using the internet. One of my friends said it best: the internet is your friend. So there's ways to reach out to them and just be honest and be cordial and let them know, hey, I'm an artist and this is my song. Would it be okay if I shared music with you from time to time? I thought it'd be right for your playlist. Essentially, when I take on a campaign, that's all I'm doing. I'm scoping out those playlists. I'm finding the right curators and making sure that I'm delivering music that they'll ultimately like. But again, these companies are quite expensive at times. So I would always recommend that an independent artist kind of explores their options on the front end of doing it themselves, and having conversations with whoever they can to understand this world before they hire somebody. And that goes, as you're saying, that's the same with any company that you hire, whether that's marketing, whether that's PR, branding, basically knowing what you're getting into on the front end before you sign anything away.
Right, man, 100%. And honestly, to that point, I was reading one of your blog posts on Indian Moon. And side note here, I definitely recommend folks go and check out your posts because they're very interesting and very well crafted. So on this particular post, you talked about every dollar you spend on recording or producing the album, you need to save $1 or was it $2 for marketing?
I think it's $2 for marketing. I can't take credit for that. I want to say that was Scott Borchetta, but that might be incorrect as well. But yeah, I think
it's so true.
It's very true, and it's so true. It almost hurts because if I'm working on an independent artist and they just raised $15,000 for a Kickstarter or something like that, and they just spent all that money on the production, and they're like, great, I'm ready to release it, and they're coming to somebody like myself, and you're like, okay, well, what's your budget to do X, Y, and Z, and not just to pay for me offering services, but for anybody that they want to bring on, whether that's PR or running ads or, creating artwork, creating great brand. And they're like, well, I spent all this money on production. Well, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot, because it does take a little bit of cash behind a project, any way you slice it, to get it in front of the right people. Whether that's hiring somebody for streaming strategy or whatever you're doing. So yeah, that's just, I guess, a small takeaway for any independent artist to recognize whenever you're coming into an album cycle and you want to promote your music, is to make sure you have money set aside for marketing at the end of it.
I would even take that one step further back and say, you put all this time and effort into writing these songs and perfecting them out live. So please don't go into a cheap studio. Pool all your money, save some money and go into a studio where you can get the best product possible for your budget. If you need to record songs one by one to get the best final product, do that, because you want the best representation of your songs, because that is what you're going to be spending twice as much money marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely balance there. I'm not saying go out and hire the worst producer you can find and then throw $10,000 at Facebook ads. Obviously, it's more a testament to have a cohesive campaign that includes an overall budget that slices up your production budget and your marketing budget. Just go into your recording process knowing that on the front end that it'll probably be good for you to have some money left over to make a music video, to run a few ads, to hire some agencies wherever they are to help get your music in front of the right people.
Right. And I mean, essentially what we're both saying is plan it out. Make a plan. Sit down, create a short-term and long-term goal sheet, parse out your budget. I know a lot of musicians really hate doing this, but hey, that's where someone like Sean comes in. Very helpful from a business and management standpoint. So again, man, thanks so much for taking the time to talk. Now, Indian-moon.com, is that the main site that we want to drive people to learn more about you and your services?
Yeah, Indian-moon. There's not too much there. Honestly, if you wanted to find out more about me or have a conversation, best thing to do is probably email me. It's Sean@Indian-moon.com, and that's just SEAN.
Awesome, man. So is there anything that you want to further promote? I mean, you've got the floor, my dude.
Yeah, I suppose. I guess a couple releases that I just had that are doing really well. Ginny Owens, we landed on New Music Friday, and a few other editorial lists for her most recent release, Stand With Me. Coming up, I work with one of my management clients, David Dunn. We've got a lot of music down the pipeline for him, coming into a Christmas record, coming into a spring release. So pretty exciting on that end. Got a few surprise releases. I wish I could promote them for another one of my artists. But I'm just kind of spitballing. Yeah, a whole bunch of stuff. But like I said, I'm happy to have any conversations with any artists, any companies. Like I mentioned, as much as we went in depth with this conversation when it comes to streaming strategy, it's not the bulk of what I do. And I didn't take this podcast to try and bring on a ton of clients in that world. I really just think that knowledge is power. And I really wish that a lot of independent artists didn't have horror stories of, not even just streaming promotion stuff, but PR and all that kind of thing. Because I've been there, just starting out, hiring all these companies. So I think that anytime you can talk to somebody who doesn't have a stake in the game in terms of trying to get you to pay them money, and they can give you honest feedback about what a campaign of this nature looks like, I think that that's super helpful. So I'm happy to field any questions or conversations and help a few people navigate that. So anybody who wants to reach out, feel free.
All right, Sean, man, many thanks again, and we will talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it.